When I explain or teach about woodworking, I try to convey it as really just a set of processes. Processes that are more or less followed in a specific order, and processes that are often not all required. Just a set of stepwise processes that, if worked through with care and attention to detail, can yield a beautiful result. A summary of these processes is that they transform a tree into a functional object, be it a house, or a table, or a chest of drawers. In this video, I want to share some of these processes and illustrate how they were accomplished in Japan in the past, and for a small group of dedicated craftsmen, the present. In early January 2020, while I was apprenticing as a carpenter in Japan, we went to an event known as a Hatsurokai, which translates into a sort of a hewing festival. It's basically a casual get-together of like-minded carpenters to talk about tools, to show off their skills, and make new friendships and solidify old ones. On display were all the traditional Japanese woodworking tools and processes: hewing, adzing, sawing, spear planing, and finish planing, which I'll loosely group into the general woodworking processes of milling. There's a whole other process before milling that involves the selection and felling and preparation of the tree, but once you have that tree, milling is the next step, and that's the process of turning that tree into a usable material. Each of the processes both shapes the wood and makes the surface finish finer and finer as you move through each process. Now, this could be as simple as just removing the bark, but in other cases, as you'll see, it could also involve shaping the log and finishing the surface. So let's begin with hewing, the process of creating a flat face on one side of the log. The carpenter swings this massive broadaxe called a masakari down against the side of the log, shaving off scalloped chips. The blades are symmetrical and have sort of a bulge on them so that when the blade enters, the curve on that bulge causes the blade to bounce out of the cut, popping off a chip. I will be the first to say that this is a difficult and exhausting activity. These masters really made it look effortless, but they're swinging multi-kilogram blades with perfect precision. I really could only swing a couple times before I was tired, just to try, and these old guys were swinging for hours at a time. One of my teachers actually, when he was an apprentice, just constantly was hewing a whole bunch of logs in his apartment so that he could learn how to do it right. So I'm really looking forward to getting some experience and getting the hang of it. After the logs are hewed with two flat sides, the next process is adzing, which flattens the top of the log and provides a flatter, more refined finish. The tool for this is called the chona, which is just Japanese for adze, and it can come in a variety of shapes, either flat across the face, curved, or sort of scooped. The blade is fitted to a curved mulberry branch that's grown into that shape, and that provides just the right amount of spring to cause a bouncing action that cuts and pops off a chip, similar to how the masakari works. While the flat blade chona does best for cleaning a flat surface, the curved or scooped varieties can yield an elegant pattern that in many cases is left as finished surfaces for steps or seats or large natural timber frames. I can vouch that it's very pleasant underfoot. So whenever I show a video of adzing, people invariably freak out about the idea of swinging this razor-sharp blade towards one, sandaled foot. In some cases, the sandal is kind of even used to catch and stop the blade as sort of like a guide. But the fact is, these tools are just an extension of the body of the craftsman wielding them. Accidents are very rare, but I'll agree that it's a little nerve-wracking the first few times. A well-adzed surface is already quite flat, especially with the flat-bladed chona. But to refine it even further, we move on to planing. In the old times, this was accomplished with the yarigana, or spear plane. This is one of my personal favorite tools. Amazingly, this tool was largely forgotten in Japan until the remains were discovered during a large temple reconstruction at Horyuji, by master carpenter Nishioka-san. So he had blacksmiths make modern equivalents to these sort of decaying tools that he found under the temple and revived spear planes in Japan, and now we have them. I think it's awesome that there's sort of these ancient tools that we didn't know about, and we've rediscovered them and are using them again. The blade is a curved spear point, which is pulled along the wood obliquely to the direction of pull, and that blade curve touches the wood at only one point, producing these tightly wound spirals that spin off the tip of the blade. It's a very zen act to wield the tool. You're always sort of riding this point where the cutting is best. And so you can take down the high spots and impart like a flatter, rippled texture to the wood. And at the right angle, you see this light glinting off these ripples, kind of like a little ocean. So during this festival, I just found myself time and again just taking pass after pass with the yarigana. And I definitely want to incorporate that finish into some future furniture designs. All right, so we hewed, adzed, and spear planed a log. And basically we have something that you might call S4S today, surface four sides. Traditionally, these might be laid out now and made into the frame members of a timber frame building. These processes kind of echo the modern equivalent of jointing and planing a timber. And if you go visit some of the castles in Japan, in some great examples, you'll see every timber in there has a lightly scalloped surface from either the adze work or the spear plane. Not all parts of a project can be large timbers, though. In many cases, we need boards, and this can be accomplished in two ways. And my personal preference is a nice powered bandsaw, but in the old days, it was done either by splitting or sawing. Splitting is nothing particularly advanced. You strike a line along the log, and then wedges are driven in at even intervals, and it opens up the crack with each massive hammer blow. For this fairly straight grain wood, this Hinoki cypress here, you can split a fairly straight and even section. By this point in the festival, I think we all were several biru deep, and when you get a bunch of guys tipsy with hammers, you're going to start hitting stuff. And once that log is split, which I didn't get any video of, those rough surfaces can be cleaned up in the same way with adzes and spear planes to form these large, thick planks. For thinner, more precise planks, a large saw called a obiki or meibiki, it's a whaleback saw, is used, and that large flat surface helps the saw track into the cut. We all got a shot at taking many grueling strokes just to cut this one board off a log. It's amazing how much work would go into making a floor in the old times. Here's this famous woodblock print of just that, showing old carpenters cutting boards in the shadow of Mount Fuji. These guys are much more hardcore than us because it took us, most of half a day, all of these carpenters trading off to saw this log down. And if you look down at the bottom left of that picture, you'll see a saw being sharpened. And fortunately for us, we had our own legend at hand, Mitsukawa-san, a famous saw maker, and he had set up a sharpening station to keep these saws in tune. He also brought one of his recent creations, a smaller saw with these deep gullets to pull out the chips that we used to finish off the log. Again, unfortunately, I turned the camera off just as the log came apart, so I missed that moment, but once we got it apart, everybody was very happy that task was over. Again, the sawn surface can be used just as is, because it has a very certain aesthetic to it, or finished planed. So speaking of that, the last process on display at the festival was finished planing with a Kanna, the wooden block pull plane that was developed in Japan from the Chinese equivalent that was brought over many years ago. So if hewing is like NASCAR, then hand planing is Formula One. In the corner of this small shop, a group gathered with their custom toolboxes and tuning kits to adjust these little beasts of performance. The blade geometry, edge sharpness, steel quality, and block preparation all contribute to a device that will turn wood into glass, basically. To become functional with a Japanese plane is a several-year adventure. I am amazed how long it's taken me to even get a decent surface sometimes. And to become exquisite, it takes a career. And some of these guys have competed in the Japanese Hatsurokai, which is a much larger festival where carpenters come from all over and compete to get the thinnest, most perfect shaving. And my teacher actually made it to the final round, and his younger days. I mean, he's just soft-spoken, but can wield a Kanna. And these shavings are like less than 10 microns, which is thinner than a blood cell. I mean, this is just, it doesn't make sense when you see this sort of cloud of wood come off the top of the board. And when they cut the wood fibers that are such a clean cut, they resist moisture penetration, and it becomes sort of like a mirror, and you don't even need an additional finish to complete a project. I actually brought a small super surfacer back from Japan, and that as a machine that attempts to automate the hand planing process. It moves wood along a sharpened blade, but for the absolute peak finish, there's really no comparison to a properly tuned Kanna wielded by a master. So these processes on display at Hatsurokai could take a log down to a dead flat smooth surface. It was really awesome to see and participate in and be taught by so many willing and friendly carpenters. Even with my limited Japanese, the community and conversation was great. We had a lot of food and had quite a few drinks, and ultimately, that's what this hobby, craft, and vocation is all about. Building things at the razor's edge of your ability with great people that have come before you. Attending this festival was a truly special time for me. I was kind of recovering from a bout of a depressive funk, and being surrounded by such warmth and craft reminded me why I got into Japanese carpentry in the first place. In the next video, I'm going to go into a more modern look at the woodworking processes as I go through building an entrance gate, so be on the lookout for that. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this content valuable, I'd really like your support. Please click on that subscribe button and the bell to get notified of new videos. If you really want to make my day, join us as a Patreon and get early access, plans for projects, and so much more. I want to give a shout out to our new Patreon, Dorian. Thanks so much for the support, man. And always, friends, never stop building.